Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're looking at,
Yeah.
well, this is a big one.
It is.
This is the impeachment of Kenya's Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua.
Right.
And wow,
Yeah.
there's a lot here.
There's a lot to unpack.
So much happened.
Absolutely.
We've got accusations flying around, a dramatic vote court appeals, and a president who just went completely silent. What's your take on that?
That silence is fascinating, isn't it? It's just so
Yeah.
intriguing. I mean, was he trying to distance himself strategically, maybe protect himself a bit? Or was it a sign of some sort of internal conflict within the ruling party? Or maybe even a calculated move to just consolidate his own power?
Right.
It's really like a political thriller. We're all trying to figure out the hidden motives here.
Okay, so let's back up a bit for some context here.
Okay.
We know Gachagua was hit with 11 charges.
Yeah.
11. That's a lot.
It is.
Everything from violating constitutional principles to undermining the judiciary, even inciting ethnic division.
Serious stuff.
This isn't just a parking ticket.
No, not at all. These accusations are really striking at the very heart of a functioning democracy. And the sheer number of charges, I think, suggests a pattern of behavior, not just an isolated incident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the National Assembly vote, which the article says was a landslide, 282 in favor of impeachment.
Wow.
Versus only 44 against it.
Yeah, that's a huge margin.
What do you think? Were people surprised by that?
Well, I think that vote was a resounding statement, It really shows how seriously the National Assembly was viewing these charges against Gachagua.
Right.
It highlights the potential consequences when a leader loses the confidence of their peers, especially in such a dramatic way.
Yeah, it really feels like a political earthquake.
It does.
So then we get to the Senate hearings, 2 days of evidence and testimonies. But Gachagua himself is missing.
Yeah.
He's in the hospital, and his legal team asks for a delay.
Right.
But that's denied.
Wow.
Do you think that absence hurt his defense?
Well, it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But I think his absence definitely made it more challenging for his legal team.
Yeah.
The right to present your own defense is fundamental.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to say for sure how it affected the outcome. But it definitely raises some questions about whether he was able to put forward his strongest possible case.
Yeah, for sure. So in the end, he's convicted on 5 of those 11 charges.
Okay.
Including ethnic incitement, breach of public trust, and undermining the president's authority.
Wow.
This leads to his removal from office and a ban on holding public office ever again.
Yeah.
So have we ever seen consequences this severe before?
Well, Gachagua's removal sets a pretty significant precedent. It shows that the Kenyan Senate is willing to hold high-ranking officials accountable, even if it means removing them from office. And this really reinforces the idea that no one is above the law.
That's for sure.
And sends a really powerful message about the importance of integrity and ethical conduct in government.
So while facing those consequences, Gachagua decides to fight back and files a court case.
Okay.
What are the grounds for his challenge?
Well, his argument is focusing on procedural unfairness and violation of his constitutional rights.
Right.
Particularly because he couldn't present a full defense due to being hospitalized.
Oh, interesting.
It's a classic legal strategy, challenge the process itself, not the accusations.
Yeah, makes sense. But it throws a wrench into the narrative.
It does.
It sparks this public debate. Was the impeachment really about Gachagua's actions, or was this something more political?
Yeah, and I think that question lingers, especially with President Ruto's silence throughout this whole thing.
I know, it's almost deafening.
It is.
So we have a removed deputy president battling it out in court.
Right.
A president shrouded in mystery and a nation on edge.
Yeah.
What does this removal even mean for the structure of the Kenyan government now?
Well, the Constitution says that the president must appoint a new deputy president.
Right.
And this decision is critical on a lot of levels. It's about restoring stability and public confidence.
Right.
But it's also a huge political
Okay.
chess match.
Especially with
Yeah.
future elections coming up.
Absolutely.
The article mentions a few potential candidates, each with their own strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
What do you think is going to influence President Ruto's choice here?
Well, his choice is going to be heavily scrutinized.
Yeah.
He's got to balance the need to unify the party, appeal to voters, and navigate all these alliances and rivalries.
That's all.
It's a masterclass in political maneuvering
Right.
with potentially huge consequences for the future of Kenya.
It's like he's holding all the cards, but everyone is watching him.
Yeah, everyone's trying to figure out his game plan.
Exactly.
It's fascinating. And while we wait to see what happens, let's not forget about Gachagua. His legal challenge could still have a major impact on everything.
For sure.
This story is far from over.
Absolutely. So we left off with Gachagua challenging this impeachment in court.
Right.
Ruto's over there making his moves.
Lots of moving parts.
And the whole country's waiting to see what happens next.
Yeah, it's...
What are the chances Gachagua actually wins this legal challenge? Could he actually be reinstated?
Well, it's definitely an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Courts tend to be really cautious about interfering in political processes like impeachment,
You're right.
especially when it comes to questioning a legislative body like the Senate.
I see.
They're more likely to focus on whether the procedures were followed correctly, not on the accusations themselves.
So it's less about whether Gachagua actually did what he's accused of and more about whether they removed him the right way.
Exactly. Think of it this way.
Yeah.
Even if someone is guilty, they still deserve a fair trial. Gachagua's lawyers are arguing that because he couldn't fully participate in his defense because he was in the hospital,
Right.
that violated his right to a fair process. But it's going to be really hard to prove that this fundamentally undermined the fairness of the impeachment.
Okay. So it sounds like legally things aren't looking so good.
Yeah, it's not looking great.
But even if he doesn't win this court case, this whole ordeal,
Right.
it has to have had some impact on his political career. Right.
Right.
Just the fact that he was impeached.
Absolutely. Whether he's ultimately vindicated or not, this leaves a mark.
Yeah.
You know, reputations, especially in politics, can be fragile.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if he tries to make a comeback in the future,
Right.
this impeachment will always be a part of his story.
That's true. What do you think this means for other politicians? Does it create a climate of fear where they're afraid to make big decisions because they might face the same thing?
That's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah.
The possibility of impeachment could definitely lead to more risk-averse leaders. But on the flip side, it also really underscores the importance of accountability and transparency.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, if leaders know they can be held responsible for their actions,
Right.
it might encourage them to act with more integrity and in the best interests of the people they represent.
It's almost like this whole situation is a test for Kenya's political system.
That's a good way to put it.
Can it hold leaders accountable without paralyzing the government or shutting down debate?
Exactly. And let's not forget about public opinion here.
Yeah.
The article mentioned how Gachagua's impeachment really divided public sentiment.
Right.
Some people saw it as upholding the rule of law, while others felt it was totally political.
Right. It really shows how important a free press and open dialogue are.
It does.
People need to be able to talk about these issues
Yeah.
and form their own opinions
For sure.
based on facts and evidence, not just political talk.
Absolutely. An informed citizenry
Right.
is so important for a healthy democracy.
I agree. So while the courts decide Gachagua's fate,
Right.
President Ruto has to choose a new deputy president.
He does.
What do you think is going through his head as he considers these candidates? I imagine him with a giant chessboard, carefully weighing every single move.
Yeah.
He needs someone who can do the job,
Right.
but also someone who can help heal all these divisions.
Absolutely. He's playing a high-stakes game of political chess here.
Yeah,
His choice will impact everything.
for sure.
The government, his chances of re-election.
Right.
The article talked about some possible candidates,
Right.
each with their own baggage
Yeah.
and alliances.
Did any of those names jump out at you?
Well, there's candidate A,
Right.
who's got a lot of experience, but also some controversial decisions in the past.
Right.
And then there's candidate B,
Yeah.
who's popular with a certain segment of the population, but doesn't have as much experience.
It's like he has to choose between playing it safe or taking a risk.
It's a fascinating dilemma, isn't it? And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because Ruto's decision is going to tell us a lot about his priorities and his vision for Kenya.
Right.
Is he going for stability and experience?
Yeah.
Or is he making a bolder move to solidify his power base and appeal to specific voters?
It's like we're watching a political drama play out
It really is.
in real time. And with every new thing that happens, the stakes just get higher.
They do. This whole situation shows how complex the relationship is between law, politics, and public perception.
Absolutely.
Gachagua's impeachment has exposed these fault lines within the Kenyan government.
Yeah.
And it's raised some really big questions about accountability, fairness, and where the nation is headed.
We've uncovered so much in this deep dive already.
Oh, we have.
I feel like there's even more to explore.
Oh.
As we look at the long-term impacts of this on Kenyan politics. So we've been talking about this impeachment from all sides, the charges, the court cases, all the political back and forth. Now, I'm really curious about the long-term impact of this whole thing on Kenya. What does Gachagua's removal from office say about Kenyan politics?
I think it's a really important moment. It raises some really big questions. On the one hand, it shows how strong Kenya's democratic institutions really are.
Right.
The impeachment process,
Yeah.
it was messy and contentious.
For sure.
But in the end, it showed that nobody, not even the deputy president, is above the law.
Right.
That's a powerful message to send
Yeah.
both to Kenyans and to the rest of the world.
It's like holding up a mirror to the whole political system.
Exactly.
What we see is that accountability matters.
It does.
You mentioned the rest of the world. What kind of impact could this have on Kenya's relationships with other countries?
Well, Kenya is a major player in East Africa. And beyond Gachagua's impeachment, especially with all the talk of ethnic incitement and undermining democracy,
Yeah.
that could worry some of Kenya's international partners.
Oh, interesting.
It might even affect things like foreign investment or diplomatic relationships if other countries see this as a sign of instability or a weakening of democratic principles.
So this isn't just an internal matter.
No, it's not.
The whole world is watching.
They are.
This makes me think about the future of Kenyan politics. Do you think this sets a precedent? Will other leaders be more careful, less willing to take risks because of what happened to Gachagua?
It's definitely possible. Imagine you're a politician in Kenya right now.
Yeah.
You've just seen Gachagua lose his position.
Right.
You might think twice before you do anything controversial.
That's true.
It could lead to a more cautious political climate,
Right.
which could be good or bad.
Yeah. How so?
Well, on the one hand, it could encourage more responsible and ethical behavior. But on the other hand, it could also stifle innovation and discourage bold leadership.
A tough balance.
It is. And how this balance plays out depends on a lot of things.
Like what?
Well, the outcome of Gachagua's legal challenge, for one,
Okay.
the decisions the president makes public reaction,
Right.
the actions of other politicians.
So many factors.
Exactly. It's a very fluid situation.
And speaking of potential outcomes,
Yeah.
what about Gachagua himself? What do you think happens to him now?
Well, it's always risky to try to predict the future in politics.
That's true.
But I think it's safe to say that Gachagua has a tough road ahead.
Yeah,
His reputation has been damaged,
for sure.
and even if he wins his court case, this impeachment will follow him.
Right.
But Kenyan politics has seen some pretty amazing comebacks. So never say never.
What lessons can we learn from Gachagua's impeachment?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that power can be a dangerous thing.
Right.
It can be used for good or for bad.
Yeah,
And the choices leaders make have really big consequences.
absolutely.
Gachagua's story really highlights how important integrity, transparency, and accountability are in public service.
It's a reminder that in a democracy, everyone has to stay vigilant.
Yes, both the people in power and the citizens they represent.
Well, this deep dive into Gachagua's impeachment has been fascinating.
It has.
It's been about so much more than just one man's political career.
Right.
It's given us a glimpse into how complex Kenyan politics is,
Absolutely.
the challenges of democracy, and the human desire for power.
It's been a really interesting journey.
It has. And thanks to your insights, we've all learned so much about this important moment in Kenyan history.
I'm glad to hear that.
So to everyone listening out there, stay engaged, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
As we've seen today, even the most powerful people can be held accountable when the people demand it.
That's the beauty of democracy.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Thanks for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, stay curious, and we'll see you on our next deep dive. Yeah.